welcome back to Taxation is Theft, a show that talks about all the ways the government is ripping you off and what you can do to stop them. Broadcasting live on Facebook and YouTube from an underground bunker deep within the jungles of Mexico. I'm Dan, Taxationist Theft Berman, former candidate for president of the United States and currently in the race for governor of Texas. And today I've got Ashley Shade. She is the chair of the Outright Libertarians and the chair of the LP Massachusetts. A lot of chairs in the room today. And of course, a candidate for City Council of North Adams and an all-around GSM activist. So we're going to learn about what GSM is, and it's kind of an interesting story how that came about. But we'll be talking about that and lots of cool, interesting topics surrounding that. But of course, before we get started, if you're watching the live stream, remember to like and share and comment and ask your questions. We will see your questions. We will answer them live on the show. And tonight's episode is brought to you by the Nugg of Knowledge, indoor-grown, chemical-free, smokable hemp flower and Delta 8 vape cartridges, legal in all 50 states. Get elevated at nuggofknowledge.com. And if you haven't tried Delta 8, I've been dabbling with Delta 8 myself for the last couple of weeks. It's really awesome stuff. And it's legal. I keep forgetting it's not because it's almost the same, but it's legal. It's amazing. And now on to the show. Ashley, welcome. How's it going?
It's good. How are you?
Awesome. I'm doing pretty good.
Thank
Long
you for
day
having
of work.
me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to start out just by talking about GSM and what that is, because I know there's been like this it's even kind of turned into a joke about how like LGBT turned into LGBTQ, and then like they started like LMNO everything else after that, and like everyone's like the word's getting too long. But I think GSM was kind of like a cool way to like be all inclusive of everybody. So can you tell us kind of what GSM is?
Yeah, so GSM stands for Gender and Sexual Minorities, and it's a term that we use at Outright. And we use this term because we feel it's more inclusive than LGBTQ+. It allows us to represent all the communities that are part of our umbrella without needing to add more letters to represent them. It's also a lot easier to say GSM than it is to say LGBTQ+, whatever we're adding. We tend to use the word GSM within the Libertarian Party and especially outright.
Right. Yeah. And it's like anytime like I've been in company where I say LGBT and like, I'm like, okay, did I miss something? Did I miss a letter at the end? Like that, like, cause I know like, some people take it a little bit more serious than others. And so, I think that's really cool that GSM is just kind of like, it's kind of a cool new word to be all inclusive without getting too sensitive with people. I guess like, what's your story? You want to start out there? Like how did you get involved with this, and what's your kind of history?
Yeah, sure. So I got involved in activism around 2017. I ran for office, and I ran for office in North Adams. This was before I joined the party. And I got 700 votes in a city council race that there are 9 seats for, and the 9th place winner got 1,650. So I was about 1,000 votes short of being elected. It was the first time I ran. I ran with no budget. I ran with no team. I did a couple of interviews, and a candidate forum, and was somehow able to get 700 votes, which was pretty cool. From there, I realized that there were there was a need for more voices and new ideas in activism for the GSM community. And so I started getting involved locally as an activist. I started participating in forums and doing, outreach work here locally. And then in June of 2018, I ended up joining the Libertarian Party officially. And the way that came about was I sent a message to then chair Nick Sarwark. I sent a message to his page. I never was expecting a response. The chair of the National Party doesn't care about people. like why would a chair of a national party
I
just
mean, it's not as big
randomly
as the
answer
others.
somebody's, random Facebook message, right? Like, I wasn't expecting a response, but I got a response, and I sent him a message and I said, "Hi, I'm a transgender woman in Massachusetts. I voted for Gary Johnson. I feel that that the Libertarian Party fits my philosophy and fits my understanding of things. However, I'm not quite sure if I belong here. There seems to be, pushback against the transgender community from libertarians. Is this party somewhere? Is this party an accepting place? Do I belong here?" He said, "Absolutely. Transgender people belong in the Libertarian Party. We believe in everybody's rights, and that includes transgender people." So I asked him, I was like, "Well, if you can say that publicly, I'd be more than happy to join the party." And he put out a public message, and I immediately joined, and I've been here ever since.
Awesome. And you've become extremely popular pretty quickly, which is awesome. And yeah, it's funny, like not expecting to get a message back. I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know. I don't know how many messages they get. Probably not a lot. But yeah, it's interesting. The Libertarian Party, it's extremely diverse. And I think, like, I don't know what's man, where am I trying to go with this? I think it's cool that, you're bringing attention to an issue that I think is like the M in GSM stands for minority. Like, it's a very small minority. Like, when we think of minorities, we're usually thinking about Hispanics, Blacks, Asians, that sort of like racial minorities, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's like so many different minorities, and it's interesting that, like, I feel like we've created a culture where we have minorities that it's cool to support these minorities because there's been so much activism behind it, right? There's been like this whole, like, we have to fight for minorities. But then, like, people, like, it's like we've always like related that to like racial minorities. And so, like, now you have other minorities coming along, and it's like, hey, we're a minority too, and there's laws and all these other things that are oppressing us that we want to bring attention to. And it's like, at some point, it's like, oh, but you guys aren't minorities. You're like, it's like, it's almost like we've been bringing attention to like the minority struggle, but at the same time, it's like, oh, but only to these minorities. We need to like expand that out to other minorities, instead of just like at what point do we as a society say, if there's a single person who believes one thing, or lives one way that's different than everybody else, and it's just one person, that is a minority, and that yeah. individual has rights that need to be protected just the same as everybody else.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about it, the Libertarian Party is we are the minority in politics. We are a minority group of people. We have different ideas and different ways of governance that other parties do not. And so, it's very different when you're thinking about how government affects the lives of different people. And it's really important to point out that, the government makes everything worse, as we all know. It always makes things worse. And the government is there. People get elected into government, and they use their power in government to to exploit and oppress smaller groups because they know they can. I mean, that's what it's all about. It's all about using that power. They're not going to go after the majority of people. Why would they want to do that? They need those majority people. But if there's a group they can target, they will. If there's a group they can oppress, they will. And it's important to recognize, as libertarians, we do believe that the individual is the smallest minority. However, we also need to recognize and understand that individuals will come together and collectivize into a group to fight back, especially when government is targeting specific people because they identify a certain way. And when the government is classifying you and throwing you into a group, it's kind of hard not to be a part of a group to fight back.
Right. Yeah, and I mean that's interesting too, because like the government is always dividing us into groups, and like they
Yeah.
do it. I mean, it's their divide and conquer strategy, but like even now we're seeing like the vaccine passport thing, right? Like that's becoming a thing where they're like, oh, we're going to divide you into two groups: those who've been vaccinated and those who haven't. And it's like, you know, a lot of people like they believe like, oh, no, but that's a good thing, right? Because it's gonna keep the vaccinated people healthy and safe, and you know, you'll never be, you know, you'll always be aware, so you don't have to be in a place where there's unvaccinated, disgusting unvaccinated people in the same room as you. But it's like like that. I see a lot of the same arguments coming out of that as I see coming out of the whole like what is it, the voter registration thing, right, where they're trying to say like, oh, we want, you know, voter ID, and then they're saying, oh, but that's going to be unfair access. And like I see a lot of the same arguments coming out, because you have like, you know, okay, you have with the vaccine, like, okay, you might have people who are just like, I don't want to get the vaccine, and now they're going to suffer. They're not going to have access to society in the same way as everybody else. But then you also have people who are unable to get the vaccine because they have you know, underlying conditions and all these other things, where they would be extremely high risk to take that vaccine. And like when you go with the whole herd immunity thing, it's like you know, everybody's getting vaccinated to protect these other people. So now why are you telling these other people they can't rejoin society? You have like all of these, and like I hear a lot of the same arguments with the voter registration thing too. But it's like, you know, kind of to your point, the government is like, it makes everything worse. It's taking a problem and it's saying, oh, we're gonna solve the problem by like, you know, this is how we make sure everybody gets their vaccine. But really, you're dividing society into two groups and then turning them against each other.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, the thing with the voting registration though is, voting is not supposed to have a cost, and IDs cost money. So unless they're giving IDs out for free, they can't tell people they have to pay for an ID to go vote.
Right.
You know, that's
right.
It's kind of illegal.
I've thought of that as like, you know, that would be a great solution too, right? Yeah, give everybody a free ID, but then it's like, oh, but wait a minute, like, where does the government get the money to print the IDs? Like, you know,
yeah.
they're gonna have to just rob somebody else.
$50 to print an ID, and that's what they charge.
That's true too.
Here. So, like, you know,
that's true too.
You know, they're in it to make money off of it. They don't really care. I mean, what it really comes down to again is power and control, and how do we divide people? How do we keep people divided and divisive? Because that's how the politicians win right now. The Democrats and Republicans win. They gain new members, they gain new followings by making everybody else the enemy. Everybody that opposes them is the enemy. Anybody who thinks differently is the enemy. And we need to get away from that. Politics is not, just because you don't believe the same thing I do, you're not my enemy. You're not like trying to kill me. Like, we need to get out of that mindset. We need to be able to have conversations with each other. We need to be able to disagree and then come into a room and solve problems together. We need to have a system that works that way. And right now we don't, because things are always so divisive. It's always basically life or death. And it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that way. But that's the system we live in, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it's like, it's interesting because like in advertising and marketing, right? Because I studied this for a while. There's two like major ways to get somebody to buy your product, right? There's either like the excitement, like the sexual advertising and that sort of thing, or there's fear, right? You're gonna die if you don't buy this. And there's you know, there's definitely, I mean, there's not really anything sexy about government, so they kind of like, you know, they're like, okay, well, let's abandon that one. And it's all fear. So it's you know, oh, we have to get this program or your sick grandmother is going to die, and the gays are going to take over the world with their gay agenda and turn everybody, like, it's this ridiculous shit. And like all these rapists and murderers are going to come across the border, and like it's like if you sit and like think about this stuff, it sounds really, really ridiculous. But at the same time, they've gotten so good at it that they've like, I mean, they don't just come out and say that. Like they bring up all these like really like very specific issues, and then they try to say, see, this is what's going to happen. And it's like, wait a minute, like if you took away all of the laws and took away the existence of government, you can usually look at these situations and say, well, that's criminal. We don't even need any laws to like classify that as a crime. This person caused harm to that person, and it happened once or twice. It's not like an epidemic where we need like new laws and a task force and all this other stuff. But but you're absolutely right. It's become like the politician is the used car salesman, and they're like, oh, fear. But vote for me. Fear.
Fear and anger are the emotions that politics has turned to. It's be afraid of everybody else. It's this idea that nobody is safe, that nobody can do anything without the government. You need the government.
Right.
You have to have the government. And
the truth is, nobody is safe, but it's nobody's safe because of the government.
Because of the government, exactly.
Yeah, it's so okay. Speaking of fear mongering, let's bring this one up. So I recently got into an interesting conversation on Twitter with some people who were very upset about a new law that was being proposed in Texas, and they equated the law to murder. And I was like, okay, let me go read this bill. And it was pretty short. And basically what it said is it had a lot of stuff in there, but the one line that they were having an issue with was it would make it child abuse for doctors or parents to give puberty blockers to children. That would be child abuse. And so, okay, so I can get it. Where on one side there were a lot of trans people who were saying like, okay, this is oppressive, because you're denying us access to healthcare. But then there were other people who were just saying, oh, this is like murder, which I'm like, I don't see how that. Like, that's not even like, that's just crazy.
Here's where it comes to where it could be seen as, murder. When it comes to healthcare decisions, all healthcare decisions should be left to a patient and their medical providers, period. The government shouldn't have anything to do with it. When you take away access to someone's healthcare and you deny them the ability to get treatment for something, it can put their lives at risk, transgender people especially. It is the transgender community has a very high suicide rate because society is very unkind to the transgender community. It is very difficult to transition. There's a long medical process that is required to even be able to transition, especially for minors who cannot use the informed consent model. And so with minors, you have to go through therapy for this amount of time. There's all these steps, and hormone blockers are one of these things where medically they've been proven that blockers themselves just delay puberty. They don't actually, 95% of the time, the effects of blockers are reversible. If you stop taking them after a year, you'll start going through your normal puberty. You're just going late. So, if you decide, after 6 months, and typically a year of therapy is what's required to even start what's called hormone replacement therapy, which would be estrogen or testosterone, depending. And a lot of times the recommended timing for that is 16 years old. Sometimes it can be a little earlier, but most of the time it's gone by the recommended. But also you have to have that year of therapy ahead of time too. So it's not like you can walk into a doctor's office and say, I'm trans, and start hormones. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't even work that way for adults in most places. There's a long process to all of it. And so by denying a child the ability to transition, you do adversely affect their mental health and put them at greater risk of suicide. And so it can lead to more people dying. It can lead to death because you're basically saying you're a human being, but we're going to deny who you are as a human being, even though there is medical technology available to fix what you're going through. We're going to tell you that you can't do that. And that can be devastating to somebody. It's been shown that suicide rates for minors go down significantly just by having one person in their lives who is affirming to call them and respect their wishes, call them by the pronouns they choose or by the name that they wish to be called. Just by having decency and
Wow.
respect for humanity, you can help save somebody's life and help them feel, okay, well, I do belong here, instead of feeling completely alone and shut out from the world and shut out from society.
Yeah. No, and I think like that's like that is super important too. I mean,
Yeah.
there's it's funny, like as adults we look at kids and we're like, oh yeah, kids aren't supposed to be bullying each other, but then there are so many adults who, they still go around bullying each other.
Yep.
And I think like, that's something that's like, you don't have to understand what it's like for somebody to be trans or to even like, I mean, like, yeah, I mean, like, I don't think you need to like understand what they're going through or even like have like some sort of like appreciation for what they're going through to even just like have okay, this is a human being. Like, like, uh, I don't know, like, you don't have to go out of your way to like say like, okay, yeah, let's, I'm going to support what you're doing. Maybe you don't, but to be cruel to somebody, to, to insult them, to bully them, like, that's like, you don't need to do that. Worst case scenario, just say that, okay, look, I don't get it. I don't want anything to do with that person. Okay, fine. But like to actively go out and in front of somebody and say, I mean, this is the same thing that, like we were talking about earlier. We've come so far in like how racial minorities have been treated in this country to change that. And it's like, when you talk about some of these things, like the bullying and insults, down to like some people who are like, they're like, oh yeah, let's go beat that person up for
Mm-hmm.
whatever their lifestyle is. It's like, that's the same thing that used to happen to, I mean, it still does once in a while, but it used to happen a lot more to racial minorities. And like, it's like, we grew out of that as a society. I think we kind of evolved past that. And I think that's really important. I mean, like, people are human beings. Like, these are the bodies that we're born into, and they're all different. And but at the end of the day, I mean, like, we all have minds, we all think, we all care about other people, we all have lives to live. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I mean, when it comes down to something simple like pronouns, for example, if you're walking down the street with your dog and someone says, "Oh, he's so cute," but it's a she, and you say, "Well, actually, it's she," they immediately, "Oh, well, she's so cute." But if we
Right.
do that as people, no, you're delusional. You're crazy. You're not who you say you are. We need to just respect people and have dignity and respect and just accept people for who they are at face value. If someone says, this is who I am and this is what I'd like to be called, there is absolutely no harm in respecting their wishes and calling them what they'd like to be called. I mean, it's not that hard to just have respect and dignity, and treat other people with respect and dignity. And so, when it comes to being trans, this world is very difficult right now for the transgender community. In the United States alone, there are over 117 pieces of legislation that were introduced by April in 33 different states. 4 months into the year, the government is introducing more legislation to discriminate against transgender people and exclude them from society and medical treatment than any year in history. Um, and this is being done specifically because they need a new group to pick on. They can't pick on Black people anymore. They know what happens if they do that. So they found a new group to oppress. And right now they found a new group to get riled up over. There's always going to be a new minority group to rile up over. There's always going to be a new group that the government will get riled up over and try to oppress. And what we need to remember is that if one of us is not free, none of us are free. If they can oppress one of us, they can oppress all of us. So we have to stand up for everybody, everybody out there and say everybody deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. Everybody should have the same rules in society. The government should never be allowed to discriminate. Governments are there to represent all people, not just the ones that are like them. And this has to stop.
Absolutely. I'm here. Let me bring this comment up here. I'm just trying to read this. Pheromone-induced MRI scans can tell you someone has a body that doesn't match the sex of their brain. There are kids that have body dimorphic. Is that dysmorphic or dimorphic? Is that right? Dimorphic disorder. But typically the MRI will show the difference between that and transgenderism.
Yeah, honestly, they've done brain scans and they will show, and this is where things are antiquated. MRI brain scans. If I were to go have an MRI brain scan, my brain scan would show that of a brain development and brain waves of a natural born female, of a female who was technically biologically born female. I've always been female. My brain's always been female. That's how I was born, right? And they'll show you in transgender people that those who identify as transgender women have female brains, and those who identify as transgender males have male brains. So there's nothing wrong with the brain. The brain is working fine. What happened is there was a defect with the body. There was a chromosome that crossed over. Something happened, right? And we are now at the point in medical science where this can be fixed with hormones and surgery. Most of it can be fixed. And therefore, the fact is, it used to be classified as a mental disorder because people didn't understand it. Being gay used to be classified as a mental disorder because people didn't understand it. It's not a mental disorder. Transgender people can function and do everything else in society that anybody else can if they're treated with dignity and respect. It becomes mentally abusive and harmful when our community has to fight just to say we exist and just to try to be a part of society. Like, it's draining to live your life that way, to always have to be fighting for the right to be in the room, for the right to talk, for the right to do anything. We have to keep fighting for that. And that can be draining and tiring. And people wonder why transgender people have other, mental health issues. Well, it's because we're not treated the same way as other people are in society. Give us the same treatment you'd give anybody else, and we would thrive and succeed as long as we can get access to the healthcare we need, just like anybody else who needed healthcare. Most people do better if you can get access to the healthcare you need. Right.
And there's a couple interesting things I want to say about that, because I think, first of all, so I know there are still a lot of people who believe it's a mental disorder. If it is a mental disorder, how do you treat people with mental disorders? Like, do you run around terrorizing them, insulting them, threatening them? Is that how you treat people with mental disorders? Like, that's completely irrational. But this is kind of the reaction that we see. Like, I've heard this so many times. Like, oh yeah, it's not a I've heard it's not a gender, it's a mental disorder, or this sort of thing. And I think that's really like, okay, fine. Like, even if you believe that, fine, believe that. But like, do you have to run around terrorizing people? Like, if you really think, like, is that what you do? Like, veterans come back with PTSD from whenever they get deployed. Do you do the same thing to them? Do you run around terrorizing them? Oh, you have PTSD. Like, that's nuts. That's not how you treat people. And of course, there's like a whole different stigma to that, because like, oh yeah, they were off protecting our freedom, which that's a whole other thing. But if that's what you believe, you probably have a mental disorder. But I would say this too, because there are a lot of people who they do the same thing, right? They terrorize, like, oh, you bootlicker, you statist. They insult people who believe in this. The troops are defending our freedom, which I think by your response to that, I think you kind of believe that is kind of at least it's a delusion, right? At the very least. But it's like for us to run around terrorizing those people and like insulting them is like, it's really, it's not much different. That's not going to change anything. It's not going to change their minds. And you know, it's like, what is the purpose of that? Like, don't we, like, especially we as libertarians or anarchists or voluntarists, like, if we want to show society that like what we believe is the most just way to live in a society, do we really want to run around terrorizing everybody else who's fallen for the delusion of the state? Like,
Exactly.
like we kind of have to take that into consideration too. It's not just like, it's not a one-way street, I guess.
Exactly. And if we want libertarianism to work, if we want to truly achieve liberty in our lifetimes, we have to be the better example of how to live. We have to show people that things can be done without government. We have to lead them. And we can't lead people by pushing them and punching them and shoving them. It's a lot easier to lead people down the road of liberty by grabbing their hand and saying, come along, it's okay, I'll show you the way. It can get a little dark and scary, but we'll turn the light on for you. It's okay. You know, that approach is going to work so much better than you better get the fuck down there.
Right.
You know, it's this idea that, you know, that works. One of the reasons why I'm running for office is to show people that libertarianism can work, liberty ideas can work. And my whole campaign is being run on the idea of compassion, education, and love. It's about listening to people first, hearing where they're at, showing them compassion and understanding, right? The people in my community have different needs and different problems, and I want to hear what those are. And then from there, we educate them. Okay, I understand you're going through this problem, and I understand that we've tried government solutions before. Here's another solution that we could probably try that might work or might not, but it's worth trying because the other ones didn't work. But here's a solution that we can propose. This is how we can educate people and show them that liberty works. We can give them a less government solution. We can give them other ideas. And they're going to be willing to take those ideas because you listened to them first and you heard them out and you're trying to help them. And you know, that's what it's all about. At the end of the day, politics is about people. It's about helping people. It's about community. It's about togetherness. One thing that we've learned from COVID is that we need other people. We're not meant to be isolated. We're not. We're not meant to be isolated. Humans need each other. And so we really have to come together and figure out how we can have a society where we can have diverse and different people and ideas, still treat each other with dignity and respect, still be able to come and sit down at the table together, talk about our differences, talk about ideas, and come up with solutions to problems together.
Yeah, awesome. I love it. And that's, you know, that's something I'm always preaching to libertarians, because I know, like, first of all, libertarians have this, like, there's a stigma that libertarians hate the poor and they want like everybody to die, right?
Yeah, no.
But and I always give shit to libertarians because, you know, like when you ask them like, well, how do you solve the homeless problem or something like that? They're always like, oh, just tell them to get a job. And it's like, that's why people believe that you hate the poor. But the reality is, like, and I have to admit, like, you know, the first time I was introduced to libertarianism and I was kind of asked to explain, you know, like, how do we solve that problem without sounding like you hate the poor? Like, I struggled with that.
Mm-hmm.
But then I was like, but that's not right, because this is like, the government is oppression. We have to get rid of the government. But yeah, there's some people who are going to hurt if we do that. So what's the solution to that? And so I started like having to like come up with that. And it's like, but it's like, it's not natural for us to have that built into our brains, because it's like, this is a big, complicated machine that some brilliant minds, as much as evil as they were brilliant, created this system. Like we have to really be mindful and thoughtful to be able to disassemble it. Like that's
Exactly. You can't just tear the rug out from people and let them fall down a cliff, you know? People are hanging by the cliff. You can't just push them over and expect everything to be okay. You kind of got to pull them off the cliff, get them down the hill, get them down to the ground where they're safe. And it's not a one step like end all the programs and kill everything. You can't just pull the rug out from people like that. People need to know that they're secure. You do that, people get afraid, they'll never vote for you. You scare them all away. So you have to show them an alternative. There has to be an alternative first. You can't just pull the rug out from under people with no alternatives. You find another solution to the problem. And what we've noticed is, especially with big government, especially with federal government, there's a lot of waste. There's a lot of duplication. There's a lot of rules and regulations that drive costs significantly higher. And those are the barriers we need to look at first. And we need to, tear those down, get those out of the way so we can make the systems so that we can actually change the systems to be better for people. As we all know, taxation is theft, but if you scream that at a normal voter, they're not going to know what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah.
What do you mean taxation is theft? My roads, my schools, who's going to pay for these things? Well, let's find the answers to those things together. Let's find alternative solutions to these problems together. Just because you pay taxes to the government for these services doesn't make or give you the moral high ground. The moral high ground comes by putting in the work and being willing to actually help people on the ground, doing it yourself. You shouldn't have to have money taken from you to do the right thing. We should all do the right thing and take care of our communities because it's the right thing to do. We live in a world where there shouldn't be homeless people or starving people, where there's enough wealth and things to go around to help everybody if we truly wanted to. But it's up to each of us to actually go out and help people. And we should help people. And people will help us. And that's the way it's supposed to work. And if we can't show that kind of a life and that kind of a system work, then nobody's ever going to go for it, and nobody's ever going to vote, and nobody's ever going to want liberty. The squirrels, they I don't know. If there were a squirrel in my yard, I'd be charging rent. Like, nah, you ain't living here for free.
I think that's hilarious because I've been using the analogy lately that because right now everybody's like, oh, what do we do for jobs, and we need higher wages and we need all this and that just to survive. And it's like, wait a minute, back when we were cavemen, that was never a thing. Gork was never walking around saying, oh, I need a job. That was never a thing. This is a modern issue of a modern society when it's like, where did that all come from? Well, we can't survive like the squirrels because the government owns all the land. And if we build a house on it, they're going to kick us off. We can't go picking food from natural wild trees because that's probably against some federal law or something.
Exactly.
It's so we've been forced to participate in this society, and everybody says oh, if you don't like it, you can just leave. And it's well, realistically, you can't.
Yeah, where are you gonna go?
Yeah, and it's that's not even the moral solution to it. But even if it was, it's you can't. The government has monopolized everything. But I think this. So I wanted to bring this up because kind of how you were talking about we need to address solutions that I think. Libertarians often hear that and they're like, oh, wait, you want a government program to solve this? And it's no, the libertarians have been running around for the longest time, probably since 1971 when they started saying, end the Fed. And the closest we've ever gotten to actually ending the Fed and to getting popular support is Bitcoin. But Bitcoin wasn't sitting there oh, we need government permission to create a new thing. And and granted, there have been people who have gone to jail for trying to create alternate currencies in gold and silver. And because, the government wants to protect its monopoly. But enough people said, look, here's a solution. Here's a valuable solution. They pitched it to people. At first, people were like, that sounds crazy. And then they started adopting it. And now the Federal Reserve is shitting its pants, and they're like, oh, we're my conspiracy theory is that the reason they're printing all this money is they're buying crypto with it. Who knows? Like, I mean, but a solution was created. It didn't require passing a law. It didn't require a government program. It just required something better that everyone could transition to and abandon the government solution. So yeah, I think that's like, yeah, go ahead.
If all goes well, within 15 years, the US dollar will be based on doggy coin.
Yeah. So yeah, it really is amazing. And like, I think like this is, you know, it's easy for us to say get rid of a program, but like you said, that scares people. And it's so much better for us to say, no, do this instead.
Yes.
And give them a value. And it doesn't need to be a government program. It doesn't need to be collecting more taxes to make that happen. It just needs to be something. And of course, the government's going to try to outlaw it at some point. But it just needs to be something where, you know, people have a viable alternative to what the government is offering. And that could even be a retirement program. Teach people to invest their own money in you know, in a 401k instead of Social Security. Exactly. And once everybody understands how much wealthier they'll be when they retire, everyone's going to say, man, Social Security sucks. Let's all, and 401k, yes, it's a government kind of program, but it's getting more power away from the government, and all, like, you don't even have to create a new program. You just start shifting people away from the government program. And it's like, I think that is probably the most valuable type of activism we can have. But yeah, I wanted to go back to your to the race that you're running. So because, you know, I like what you said about you like to talk to people and like find out what their issues are. And of course, that's probably like the best way to run any campaign is to like really understand people and connect with them. Don't believe the crap you hear on TV, because that's just the propaganda. They'll try to follow the other politicians. So what kind of things, like, can you give us some specific stories of, you know, what you've learned from the constituents, what kind of problems they have, what kind of solutions you've considered or are offering?
Yeah, I mean, so the main platform that we're running on is economic development and mental health. So with economic development, we live in a old mill town. North Adams is an old mill town. You know, it used to do textile and cotton production, and then it transferred into manufacturing type jobs. And since the mid '80s, the economy out here has been really bad. We've turned into more of an arts and culture community, but there's still a lack of really well-paying jobs in the area. You know, the types of jobs that people can work at and make careers out of. And so part of my platform for running for city council is to be a business liaison to help recruit new businesses to North Adams and help show them why they should be here. We have all these resources in our community. We have 2 universities, one here in North Adams, one next door in Williamstown. Williams College is a renowned, world-renowned university, one of the top liberal arts colleges in the world. And that's right next door to us. So we have these 2 great colleges. We have these old mill buildings that have great solid infrastructure. We have the buildings, we have the people that want better jobs, and we have the facilities to train them on how to do them. So let's put all our resources together, work with businesses, get them to come here, train their workforces. We're 3 hours away from New York City and Boston. We're an hour and a half away from Albany. So we are like a center right in between all the big major cities. We have access to an area that is absolutely beautiful with a better quality of living for employees, and a cheaper cost of living for employees as well. So you add all these factors in, and we're a great place to relocate and help build. So there's got to be a lot of conversations and ideas around that. When it comes to mental health, there's a lot of conversations that need to be centered around mental health. Particularly in our area, access is a big issue. Also, so is the opioid epidemic, and so is we have very high domestic violence rates around here. We have higher suicide rates. We have an average aged population of 42.4 years old. That's unsustainable. We've been losing population for decades. Our senior population is aging, and we're not replacing them. Our younger people are leaving. Why? Because the people who do stay here feel like they're stuck, because there's not a lot of opportunity to grow. There's not a lot of opportunity for career advancement. There's not a lot of opportunity, period. And so what happens is people feel stuck, they feel desperate, they turn to substances. Why? Because the jobs aren't there. When it comes to domestic violence, what's the number one thing couples fight about?
Money?
It is money, finances, exactly. And so if we can look at the core causes of what's causing these developments, why are people turning to drugs? Why is there high domestic violence? What are some of the factors that are involved in this? A lot of it comes down to economic development, having better jobs, having a better quality of life for the people that live here in our community, giving them a reason to want to stay here and grow and build a family and a life here. So it's really about having those conversations with people, finding solutions to those problems. We also have an extremely aging infrastructure here in North Adams. We have a sewer system that's over 100 years old. 10 years ago, they priced out that it needed upgrades that would have cost about $20 million. None of the upgrades have been done. It's a decade later, and now we're looking at 40 to 50 million. And we kind of have to do something pretty quickly, or our city's not going to have running water. So we're sitting on this, potential bomb here because of lack of, years of lack of investment and resources into fixing things. Our public safety buildings, our fire and police departments are falling apart. Our fire department, their roof is basically collapsed. It rains into the fire station. Like, we have public safety people,
wow,
dealing with this. Our police station has heating issues, so even when they arrest people, like they're thrown in the cold. I mean, this is Massachusetts. It snows here. It gets cold, and so these kinds of things are not okay. And there's a lot of infrastructure ideas that are going to need to happen. And there are libertarian ways to solve these. It would be very irresponsible to take out $100 million in loans and go make these improvements happen. That can't happen. We can't afford that. We are a small city. We have a $40 million budget a year. There's not a lot of places to cut money from. A lot of the money goes to the schools, and a lot of the school stuff is mandated by the state. And with mandates, you really can't get around that. How do we solve this? Well, let's think of a libertarian solution. How can we find some extra money? What if we sell off the naming rights to our water reservoir for $10 million to a company like Google or a local company like Berkshire Bank? Hey, invest in the money, get the water treatment reservoir named after you, help us lessen the burden on people. Those are the kinds of solutions that we as libertarians can provide in local government, still help to solve problems and keep the taxes low. And hopefully not increase them at all, and hopefully lower them to where they are needed. So, it's really all about, really looking into alternative solutions and alternative ideas to help solve these big problems. I'm not a big fan of taxes. I don't like them. But if their taxes are going to exist, I'd rather them be at the local level, because you can be accountable for them. People are held accountable at the local level. It's hard to hold people accountable in Boston and Washington. I don't have access to those people. And a lot of that stuff is hidden. Locally, this money, it shows up. We know where it's coming from. We know how it's being spent. And I think a lot of people are more okay with that than they are with what's going on in, having 30% of your paycheck stolen from you with the income tax. And then it comes, that's another thing, people are poor and in poverty, and I keep saying, well, raise the minimum wage, raise the minimum wage. No, stop taking 30% of my fucking paycheck and I wouldn't need a second job. Let me have all of my paycheck and I could pay all of my bills. I wouldn't need a second job if you did that. And that's the thing to look at. Like, where is this coming from? Where is this going? And why do we let that kind of stuff happen? So, I mean, At a local level, there are a lot of libertarian ideas and solutions, liberty oriented. And yeah, sometimes you have to take small steps, but you can make incremental changes to help shape ideas and help change programs so they're not dependent on government.
Absolutely. And like, so like, as you're talking, I'm trying to like picture this all in my head and, you know, figure out how to slice in my own solutions to things. But like, so like some of the things that I observe is like, okay, you have a bunch of people who need work and you have a bunch of work that needs to be done all in the same city. What's preventing the unemployed people from you know, fixing the I think you said it was a sewer, and like the police buildings and some of these other things. And I know like some of it's going to have to do with like, well, do they have the skills required for that, or the knowledge of like how, you know, how to build those structures. But I think like with a lot of big jobs like that, you typically, you at least have somebody who understands the right way to get it done, and then you have other people who kind of provide the manual labor for that. But I know, like, you know, going into, you know, talking about like the average age of the people there, and like knowing what a lot of the young people say, like, you know, these days, like they're like, oh, I don't want any manual labor jobs. Like, I'm not going to work in a sewer. I want to get paid $15 an hour to sit around and do nothing. Like like that's kind of like what our society has turned into. And like, I want to say that like part of that comes from like the fantasy of like, oh, if you go to college, you know, you're going to get a nice office job and you're going to make $100,000 a year. And so like, but like that was never qualified with like, if you go to college for a specific thing that's extremely valuable to society. So that part was missed. So, you know, there's the basket weaving graduates that are expecting the same, but I think that's also difficult because I remember like a couple of years ago, I was reading about the average age of the American farmer was increasing every year, and it's like something like I think it was like it was in their 50s like a few years ago. The average American farmer was 50 years old, and it's because of that, right? No young people say, oh, I want to go work on a farm. And so you don't have new farmers coming in. And so like now we're like, okay, we're becoming increasingly dependent on foreign food. We're importing all of our food from Mexico and everywhere else. And it's like, I think these are like, I don't know, this is kind of like a big picture societal change that like we need to kind of, you know, suck it up, buttercup, go get some of the jobs that suck. And like, that's like, because otherwise our society is going to collapse if we don't have people doing the essential shit.
Which is why the free migration of people is so important. If people want to come here and do shitty jobs, let them come here and do shitty jobs because nobody else is doing them. Why are we going to stop people from coming here to help our society and keep us fed? They want to come here and do these things. We can't just, you know, run away and not do things, you know? So there's a lot of these nuances, but really what it comes down to, you know, I'm running for office because I believe that we can make changes and still be able to help people and still offer ideas and less government to do it. You know, I understand that, you know, not everybody's on board with that message, but we are going to win a lot more people over if we can provide solutions to problems than if we create new problems by taking away the Band-Aids that are there. A Band-Aid is there because it covers a hole. It stops a wound from bleeding out. If you rip the Band-Aid and let somebody bleed out and you don't have an alternative to stitch up the wound, you're really not helping anybody at all. So, you know, my idea is that through compassion, education, and love, we can help change society, we can help make things better, and we can truly make a difference in our own communities and our own society. And society can be a place where everybody can be happy and everybody can do what they want to do and everybody can prosper. And we shouldn't be tearing up people who do prosper down because they prosper too much. We should be looking to prosper more ourselves, and we should be working together to help everybody prosper. It doesn't have to be one or the other. We can all do it. It can be all of us. We can all win.
That's a really good point too. Like you have like, I remember like having to learn this lesson when I was a kid, that like, instead of hating on wealthy people because of what they had, and whether it's an individual or a massive corporation, figure out what you can offer them to get a piece of their pie, like to get them to share the wealth with you. And like, offering naming rights. You mentioned that one. I think that's a great idea. Offering for businesses to come to your town, maybe for a tax discount or something, which I know nobody should be paying taxes at all, but a tax discount based on like maybe where some of their other operations are. You've got these manufacturing plants that are available. Figure out some way to like, incentivize someone to come and use them. I think that is a really great way to say like, hey, there's somebody over there who's got a shit ton of money. Let's offer them some of the resources that we have in our town, so that they will bring their business here and they will bring their money with them, and they will hire our citizens as employees. They'll spend money fixing some of the infrastructure, because who wants to work in a factory where the toilets don't flush? Like there's so many benefits to that I think that's absolutely the way we should be thinking, instead of like, no, how do we tax the next town over? And we go to our state, we beg the state to tax the next town over and bring the money over here so that we can get something fixed, even though there's not a whole lot of people even using it. That kind of thing doesn't make sense. And like we have to start, you're absolutely right. We have to start looking at things in that light.
Absolutely. And if we can provide alternative solutions, that's what politics is supposed to be. It's about politics. The idea of politics is about solving problems in society. That's the ultimate goal, solving problems. Instead, now nobody solves anything. They just throw money at it and hope it goes away, which we found.
And they create imaginary problems.
And then they create other problems by creating new legislation that restricts you from helping homeless people or feeding them or doing this stuff. And they make the problems bigger. So we have to find solutions to these problems that don't require the government throwing money at them, but require ideas where we as human beings come together and help solve problems and help fix the issues in our own communities and our own society. And that's something we can do. We can all do that together.
Awesome. Well, Ashley, thank you so much for joining me on the show. I want to give you an opportunity. If people want to support you or learn more about you, where can they go? How can they help you out? Are you looking for anything specific? Volunteers, donations? What do you need to get your campaign going?
Absolutely. So if you are looking to support the campaign, please visit ashleyshade.com. You can visit ashleyshade.com /donate to send money to the campaign. We are always looking for more money so we can purchase more mailers and door knockers and literature, and really, make sure that we are able to hit every voter in North Adams 7 times is our goal. 7 different unique contacts between advertisements, mailing, door knocking, text banking. We need to be able to get the right software. We need to do that. So your donations would be great. If you're looking to support Outright Libertarians, you can find us at Outright USA. At outrightusa.com is our website. At Outright USA, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you want to learn more about the GSM community or help GSM issues, that's the place to go to get involved. And if you're in Massachusetts and you want to be involved here, you can reach out to the LP Massachusetts page. You can go to lpmass.org. Plenty of places, plenty of areas where you can get involved and come help us out. We always need more volunteers. We always need more people, more bodies doing the work, being on the ground, helping share messages, helping share content, all of those types of things. We want to spread the word of compassion, education, and love. We want to make society a better place for all of us. And we want to work with the community to help solve problems and use less government to do it.
Awesome. I love especially that last part. Less government. Absolutely. All right. Thank you again so much for joining me on the show. And guys, if you're listening, if you liked the show, even if you didn't, remember to like and share and comment and head over to youtube.com/taxationistheft and subscribe, or look up the show on your favorite podcast search thing wherever you get your podcast from. Look for Taxation is Theft, the big black and yellow. You can't miss it. And I will see you guys next time. Taxation is Theft. I'll see you around.
Thank you.